For Lawrence O'Donnell, and tonight we begin, before we get to that press conference, with the fight to replace Justice Anthony Kennedy on the Supreme Court. It's a fight that could reshape American policy and culture in Donald Trump's image for a generation or more. Now, as you'd expect, the battle lines are already being drawn. Senate Democrats are vowing to stop Trump from nominating a hard-right justice to replace the often unpredictable Anthony Kennedy.
Remember what Senator McConnell told us when there was a vacancy under President Obama? Too close to an election. Let's let the people decide. Well, we're 4 months away from an election. Is Senator McConnell prepared to keep this office vacant until after the election? I hope so.
We realize the fact that Obama's final year was taken away from him to make an appointment. So that was a new standard. It was a low standard, if you will, but it was a standard. And I, for one, and I think others, haven't forgotten that. And, you know, as you sow, so you reap.
Okay, but here's the problem. Democrats do not have the votes to stop a Trump replacement from being confirmed. Thanks to Mitch McConnell invoking the so-called nuclear option, Republicans conceded justice with just 51 votes. And the parliamentary procedures available to Democrats are limited, and they depend on all of them holding together. Meanwhile, Republicans are also gearing up for a fight on what is the most fundamental issue for much of their base, control of the court. And they're dismissing the comparisons to their conduct in 2016 with President Obama's then nominee, Merrick Garland.
This is not 2016. There aren't the final months of a second-term constitutionally lame duck presidency with a presidential election fast approaching. We're right in the middle of this president's very first term.
Today, former Vice President Joe Biden, the longtime leader of the Senate Judiciary Committee, said that in normal times, with such a divided Senate, the president would look for a consensus candidate who could get votes from both parties. But we are not in normal times. So Biden also told voters, it's up to us, America. Speak out, rise up, be heard. And that seems to be what Democrats are planning. Politico reports that Senate Democrats want the Supreme Court battle waged on the policy stakes. So what does that battle look like? Well, according to the Daily Beast, Democrats appear, quote, poised to mount an aggressive public relations campaign, talking up the electoral consequences for Republicans should they confirm an ultra-right conservative justice. People should understand that this nominee will be there for decades to come, for our lifetimes, and a good part of our children's lifetime, Senator Richard Blumenthal said, and the consequences for our nation couldn't be higher. Our friend Ron Klain, who helped oversee the confirmation of Supreme Court justices under both Presidents Clinton and Obama, told the Daily Beast that Democratic lawmakers should, quote, frame the debate squarely and firmly around the future of abortion rights, to push hard on Senators Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski, both pro-choice Republicans, and to work with Senators Jeff Flake and Bob Corker, critics of the president, on keeping Trump in check. Well, in a sign that the White House recognizes the importance of those senators, NBC News is reporting tonight that White House counsel Don McGahn reached out to Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski today to discuss the Supreme Court vacancy. The two senators confirmed the calls to NBC News. And just a short time ago, White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders tweeted that Senators Collins and Murkowski, along with Republican Senator Chuck Grassley and 3 Democratic senators, met with Donald Trump tonight to discuss the future of the Supreme Court. She also says, quote, POTUS team also talked with more than a dozen other senators today as part of an ongoing outreach to get views and advice from both sides of the aisle. So we're still very early in the nomination process, and the strategies of the two sides are still being worked out. But one thing is certain, the people who may ultimately have the most power to influence who becomes the next nominee to the Supreme Court are the American people. As Joe Biden said today, the price to be paid for putting our values at risk must be clear now. Joining us now, Christopher Kang, former deputy counsel to President Obama, where he helped oversee the confirmations of Justice Kagan and Sotomayor. He's now the chief counsel of Demand Justice, which co-hosted a rally this morning at the Supreme Court. And also joining us, Jason Johnson, politics editor at TheRoot.com and an MSNBC contributor, and Karine Jean-Pierre, senior advisor and national spokesperson for MoveOn.org. Thank you all for being here. Christopher, I'm going to start with you because you did organize that rally today. I feel like Democrats are staking much of their early messaging on looking for consistency out of Mitch McConnell and of trying to hold him to things he said in the past. That's obviously not the way Mitch McConnell operates. So absent some sudden, repair to precedent, and a completely uncharacteristic one, what else could Democrats do?
Right. So I think it's all well and good to talk about the process and to talk about the hypocrisy of Senate Republicans now. But we all know that Senate Republicans don't care about consistency or rules. So what we have to do is we have to fight this fight on the substance. We have to talk about the stakes. We have to talk about the access to abortion. We have to talk about, really, this is about the criminalization of abortion. If Roe versus Wade is overturned, they're talking about arresting women and their doctors for their health care choices. And this is not very far-fetched. This is the administration that's putting children in cages. They're not going to stop from putting women in jail.
Yeah, and Karine, you know, Donald Trump, when he was interviewing with our own Chris Matthews, said there should be consequences for women who have abortions, that there should be legal consequences. Right. And this is the issue for the right. Let's just make it clear. This is what they vote on. Yeah. Well, here's Susan Collins, who a lot of Democrats are putting their hope in, her being consistent on this issue. Here she is talking about Roe.
One of the questions that I always ask is, do they respect precedent? What is their view toward precedent? From my perspective, Roe v. Wade is an important precedent, and it is settled law.
Okay, and here she is talking about her meeting with Don McGahn. Okay, I told him there are several well-qualified people on the list whom I've supported. There's one person on the list who I voted against, and I urged him to broaden the search beyond the list, which is not to say there are not some very good people on the list. But I think when you're looking at the Supreme Court nomination, you shouldn't confine yourself. Those are a lot of words. I'm not sure they mean a whole lot. Are Democrats foolish to put their hopes in Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins?
I have to say, Joy, I don't think they are foolish. And can I just say this? Mitch McConnell just plays in the gutter. Like, you cannot trust Mitch McConnell. The rules for Mitch McConnell work only when he says so. So that's just is not going to work right there. But I go back to a year ago, and we talked about this earlier, Joy, earlier today, which was what was happening a year ago, the ACA, the skinny repeal, just under a year ago, it was like last July, and people didn't think we were going to stop that. Right. They thought, oh, for sure, Obamacare was going to be repealed, it wasn't going to hold. Who were the three people that voted no? I mean, look, McCain was the dramatic one, so we remember that one, but it was also Collins and Murkowski. Yeah. And so that no one thought that was going to happen. And what happened there was people spoke up. They flooded the lines. They went to town halls. They went to the Capitol, to the offices of the members, and they did not stop. It was amazing to see the energy behind that. We just have to double down and do the same. Just like Biden said, speak up, rise up, be heard. Yeah. And that's the only way this is going to convince Collins and Murkowski, hey, you know what? Don't be on the wrong side of history here. Yeah. And Jason, you know, there are two ways to go, right? So to Karine's point, you know, if Democrats could somehow pull off getting these two senators to go along with not giving the 51 votes, the other way, you know, there have been people who have been throwing around the parliamentary idea of just bringing the Senate to a halt, which you'd need all the Democrats to go along with. Let me introduce you to one, Heidi Heitkamp. She's not necessarily been consistent. She voted for Gorsuch. She's one of the three who did. She talked about her meeting with Trump. I stressed the importance of nominating someone for the Supreme Court as pragmatic, fair, compassionate, committed to justice, and above politics. I told the president he has a chance to unite the country by nominating a true ideological jurist who could gain support from senators on both sides of the aisle rather than create more divisions. Who thinks Donald Trump is going to do any of those things?
I don't believe any of these people. I don't trust any of the Democrats. I don't trust any of the Republicans. I certainly don't trust Mitch McConnell. We've all talked. He's a cancer on American democracy. In 100 years, they'll write about him being the new Benedict Arnold. This is what has to happen. And it's what you've talked about, it's what Chris talked about, it's what Karine talked about. People are going to have to scream and complain. They're going to have to do what we did about the border. They're going to have to do what we did about the ACA. That is the only way that the most ideological maniac who's 15 minutes out of law school, because Trump's going to pick somebody like 36 years old. Yeah. He's going to pick the youngest person he can, so that person will be there for my great-grandchildren to see. They're going to have to find some way to make that embarrassing. But here's the issue. This is a marathon, not a sprint. They got 5, 6, 7 people from the Heritage Foundation they're going to want to push through. So it's not just about stopping the first person. It's about stopping as many people as possible until November 9th when people vote and then possibly can take over the Senate if the passion about these judicial nominations can turn into voting behavior.
And I guess that's my challenge, Christopher, is that Democrats and Democratic leaders typically do not get passionate about the Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. It is the right that really fundamentally believes that they are heroically attempting to stop abortion. In their mind, this is their fundamental sort of reason for being, right, is to stop abortion from being legal. Whereas on the Democratic side, it's hard to get people exercised about the issue of the Supreme Court. It's sort of vague. And also, you know, Democratic voters tend not to come out in midterms. Is there a way to get, I think the press conference is going to start. Hold that thought. I think we're going to go to this press conference now about the shooting in Maryland. Take a listen.
release that information to you. We'll put it out as quickly as possible.